Hello and welcome to my presentation. This will be a short video showcasing my eset second year capstone project, a toddler piano. I chose to do this project because I wanted something I could share with my two daughters.
Delia and Juno.
The expected outcome of this project is simply when I press one of the 13 buttons I am using to represent a single octave of piano, it will play that note out of the speakers. The first thing I needed to do was to find open source note files, which I quickly tracked down online. This is a note file. This is one note in analog form. It is 1 second long and it was sampled at 44.1 kilohertz. The total amount of bytes this results in is 44,100 bytes. Once I have an audio file, it looks like this, but I can't put that in my microcontroller as a straight analog file. So I have to use this program called Audacity to convert this analog into digital. Now let's see it convert. Ding! It's done. Now we have 44,000 bytes for one note. I need to store 13 of these to have all of my notes. This is a minimum of 573,300 bytes or 57,573 kilobytes, simply for the note storage. The microcontroller I am using only has 128 kilobytes of memory available. This makes external storage a necessity.
Let's talk about how my memory is organized.
This is 2,000 bytes of data. One page, double-sided. This is 64 pages. These make up one block. There are 2,000 bytes on each page. Each sheet of paper represents one block. Each block had 64 pages in it, and each page had 2,000 bytes. That is a lot of memory.
To transfer these notes, I need to use UART.
UART's main purpose is to transmit and receive serial data through a physical connection. My project uses a program called XCTU to facilitate the transfer. Now that my computer is running XCTU, I have connected my computer to my microcontroller with a UART cable, and now I can transmit the digital representation of a note over the UART cable. Success! The note has made it to the microcontroller. When the digital representation of the note arrives at my microcontroller, I need to send it straight to my external memory. When my microcontroller wants to send out 2,000 bytes of data, it's a circular buffer, so it needs to take back 2,000 bytes of data. Transfer happens like this. The microcontroller doesn't have to use this data, it just has to acknowledge it before it can send out more. At this point, I have taken 13 notes, used Audacity to convert those notes into the digital equivalent. Then I took that 44,000 bytes, used XCTU and my UART cable to transmit that to my microcontroller. And from there, I transferred each note to its own unique address. Now that all 13 notes are stored in my external memory, when I press a single button, I use SPI to transfer that note all the way to my 8-bit DAC. My 8-bit DAC is a digital to analog converter, very similar to the way Audacity worked to convert an analog signal into digital. This reverses that and converts a digital value into an analog signal.
As I got my prototype signed off on the last available day, and school was moved online 2 weeks after, I didn't progress past the prototype hardware or software. So I can talk a little bit of what I intended to do to complete the final portions of my project.
When I sent my note to the DAC, I could only send 2,000 bytes at a time. And when it got to the DAC, it would automatically convert it, and that created a delay between the notes. And it sounded like this. That was unacceptable. So, my workaround was to take every fifth sample that is highlighted and store that on my microcontroller. The space I had on my microcontroller could hold 6,000 samples of a 42,000 sampled note. Every highlighted one is every fifth. And when I stored these on my microcontroller, it turned into this. That's every fifth sample for 6,000 samples, and I could store that on my microcontroller and then send them all out at the same time to get one clear note.
The solution I found with every fifth byte sampled for one note may not have been needed once I placed the new note samples I had been working on into the external storage. The new notes were sampled at 16 kHz and were uniformly 0.5 seconds long. If the notes were at 16 kHz at 0.5 seconds, it would result in the full note being only 8,000 bytes. Depending on the amount of storage I could use on the microcontroller for temporary storage, I could sample every other byte and there would nary be a difference between the two samples. With hindsight, I could say I had misplaced priority of component characteristics. Number 1, I selected a land grid array package without ever having worked with one before. Number 2, I did not select a manufacturer with a reputation for quality datasheets. There was a major issue with the storage locations, but no documentation implied that it could happen. And number 3, cost was a concern initially, but with the amount of time I spent with non-functioning memory because of the soldering and time spent deciphering a datasheet, I would gladly pay more for a more familiar package and an easy to use and understand datasheet.
Since my project was made for kids, the look was important. I wanted bright, colorful buttons that were fun to press. And they sure are. This knob would control the volume through a potentiometer, which would control the gain. A fun toggle switch that makes a satisfying click. Large speakers. Just fun buttons to press. And a large box to house them all in.
A key lesson I learned was to have your components easily accessible.
Oh, wonderful. My button is working. Boop, boop. What's this? I put in the wrong color. I'll just lift the lid here. Pull out the quick connect. With the button out now, I can put in my new one that has a quick connect on it. Fasten this to the top face. Plug it back into the PCB. And that's how long it takes to replace a button. And all components are designed like that, with quick connects for easier troubleshooting and replacement.
This was to be my record and tutor toggle. One way would be record, and the other would be tutor.
Here's how I intended it to work. I would put it into record mode, and then it would wait for the first 5 notes to be entered. The first 5 notes would be stored into memory, and then you could go back to free mode. If we selected the tutor mode after, it would play the 5-note sequence that we previously recorded.
Now it's time for the user to play the exact same sequence of notes. Success! The cost for the project at the point I stopped was $337.55 for all the material, with $281.69 coming out of my pocket. This included multiple quantities for components during the prototyping and multiple quantities of some components in preparation for the final design. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them.